Hello and good day, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to yet another episode of our JG7's classroom series. In this series, we want to teach you the ropes about dogfighting, we call it BFM, basic fighter maneuvers, and tactical air combat, especially in a World War II environment. And since this is a consecutive series or a series with consecutive episodes building up on previous ones, we highly recommend that you watch the series from start to finish to make sure that you can follow along and understand everything. I'm your host and instructor Killerfliege. I wish you a pleasant lesson, so let's dive right into today's topic. So today's lesson I would like to dedicate to the topic BFM-Essentials. Now, there's probably some more aspects that you could cover under, or what you would probably consider essential for BFM, basic fighter maneuvers. But I would like to focus on these very fundamental concepts and aspects of BFM. So first of all, I'd like to discuss real quick with you what are our actual assets in BFM. So what do we have to look out for? For example, in life, if you want to live a wealthy life, you have to look out for money and ways to increase your money. So there's various assets to achieve that. And in BFM we have similar equivalents. So then I want to talk about the topic BFM problems and BFM solutions, because that's essentially what it's all about when two opponents try to get onto each other's six to shoot each other down. Within that topic we have the special terms range, angle and closure, or closure rate, and we shall see what's that all about. And last but not least, I want to talk a little bit about what the control zone is and why it's so important for BFM. So, first and foremost, BFM-Assets. Luckily, there's only really two that we need to consider, and that is energy and position. Now, with regards to energy, you can imagine that energy is like a currency or like the money. If you're looking for an analogy, because with energy you can buy maneuvers, with energy you can buy altitude, with energy you can do all sorts of things. So your energy is important, and there's two types of energy that we need to consider. This is one's kinetic energy, we call it EK, and Ekin, and potential energy EPOT or EP. And to illustrate what that means, well, kinetic energy is basically our speed, and potential energy is measured, let's say, in our altitude. And hence the idea is that during your BFM maneuvering that you keep your energy high, because you want to keep your money, because with lots of money on your account you can do lots of nice things. Same here, you want to keep your energy account healthy, so you pay special attention to keeping speed and altitude in check. And then we have position. Now this is rather obvious, because obviously, especially with World War II fighters where we only have forward firing weapons, we need to be in a position where we can deploy our weapons. Now if there is a target, for example, in front of us, let's call this target our bandit, then we can obviously shoot at him. So we can say that bandit is defensive because they are defending against our attack, whereas if there is an opponent or a bandit behind us here, he can potentially attack us, so he is offensive and we are defensive. And in order to visualize where we are with respect to our bandit, are we offensive on him, then he's in front of us in the green zone, or are we defensive against him, then he'd be here in this red zone. We can use the 9-3 line. So just visualize a line between your left and your right wingtip, and anything that's in front of that you can potentially engage. Anything that's behind that can potentially engage you. So we want to make sure that we keep whatever we need or want to engage up here in front. Okay, so that's the concept of 9-3 line, and this is to visualize a positional advantage or disadvantage. Of course, if somebody is in front of our 9-3 line and we are behind theirs, then we have a positional advantage, and vice versa. Okay, so far so good. Now, what we want to talk about is really how do we approach now this whole maneuvering situation. There's a guy, he tries to shoot down, we try to shoot him down. How do we approach this? And essentially it could look like this. There is one guy, let's assume there is one guy, and he's behind the 9-3 line of our other guy, so he can potentially engage that bandit. Red is always bandit from here on forth, and blue is us, or the good guy, if you will. Now, obviously, he doesn't want to get shot down. So what he will do is he will maneuver in such a way that this guy is not able to follow him. In other words, he creates BFM problems or maneuvering problems that the other guy is trying to solve. And as you can see here, as long as he can solve these problems, or in other words, stay with the bandit, he's good to go. But if the bandit can make a move, let's say, or create a problem that is too much for the attacker, in this case us, to solve, then we are going to not be able to follow the bandit anymore, and he will be able to use that against us. So maybe in this case, for example, we shoot out in front of him, and now we are here and he is here. So we could not find a solution to his maneuvering. And that's this whole concept of prop BFM problems and solutions. So if we want to summarize that in words, we can maybe find a phrasing such as this. A BFM problem is basically this. It makes it difficult for an opponent to follow you through maneuvering. A BFM solution is a good way, or you find a way to solve these problems. In other words, you find a way to stay behind the opponent or the target that you're following. So you're capable of following and staying behind the opponent. In other words, behind his 9-3 line. Okay? So the opponent tries to get you in front of his 9-3 line so he can engage when he's defensive initially, whereas the guy that's trying to solve these problems is trying to stay behind the opponent's 9-3 line to stay offensive. Okay? It's a very high level concept, but it's great because it helps us to understand what's going on. Okay, so now how can we express BFM problems and solutions in more graspable concepts or terms? And there are basically three things that we need to describe a BFM problem. There's range, angle, and closure or closure rate. So the range is obviously the distance between you and the opponent. Could be horizontal, vertical, or a direct connection, all of which works. We just consider now for simplicity the horizontal distance. Angle is the relative orientation between you and the bandit. So the orientation of the noses respectively. And closure rate is how fast you're approaching the bandit. So closure rate can be defined as your own speed minus the bandit's speed. If it's positive or greater 0, then obviously you're closing in on the bandit. If the closure rate is negative, then V2 is larger and hence the bandit is getting away. So these are three very important quantities or that you need to understand in order to understand BFM problems and solutions. So now that we've learned what parameters exist that define, let's say, a BFM problem, let's have a look at how the problems actually look like or manifest. Now, as you can see here, we have obviously range, angle, and closure. So we call it an R problem, an A problem, and a C problem. Now, what could be an R problem? Well, you could be too close to the target to not be able to use your weapons effectively, or not having enough space and time to react to the opponent maneuvering. Because if you're too close and he does a sudden move, then you would have to react very quickly, and you might not be able to do so if you're too close. On the other hand, if you're too far away, well, then you won't be able to deploy your weapon, so that's a problem as well. Angle problem is usually when the angle is relatively high, so much greater than 90 degrees, because angles greater than 90 degrees actually make it very difficult to hit a target, and also potentially the opponent can shoot back. So think of a typical head-on approach. So that wouldn't be ideal, obviously. So a too high angle is not good either. And then we have a closure problem, and here usually the bigger problem is when the closure rate is too high. So you have a closure rate much greater than 0, because that reduces your reaction time that you have, or that you need when your opponent does a sudden move. Yeah, so that's that. And obviously if the closure rate is very far negative, then obviously you can't use your weapons either, at least if you use ballistic weapons, and then you have a problem too. But generally these are the main problems that concern us when we do BFM. So what's the solution? Well, we have to manage range, angle, and closure accordingly to stay in control. And this is a good keyword, because how do we manage range, angle, and closure, or how do we know that we manage range, angle, and closure properly? Well, when we are inside the opponent's control zone and we stay there. So what is this control zone? Well, the control zone, I try to visualize this in a 3D diagram, is an area behind the opponent, usually some sort of cone-shaped construct, in which you have optimal range, angle, and closure. Now if you look at the diagram, you can see this is our opponent, we are the blue guy, and we would ideally like to be in this green area, because that's our control zone. That means we are not too close to the opponent, so I call this minimum distance that you should keep from your opponent R-min. And we are within a certain angle. Let's make an example, maybe 30 degrees left, 30 degrees right, which is supposed to be indicated by this. And yeah, we are not too far away from him in terms of altitude either. So we have a good horizontal range separation, we have a good vertical separation, and we don't have a large angle. And if we stay in this green zone, we should be able to stay offensive on the opponent, and we should be able to manage whatever BFM problem he's gonna throw at us. And obviously the closure rate when we stay inside this zone should be close to 0 as well, or just maybe slightly above to get closer to deploy the weapons, but not too high so we can't manage it. And now the thing that's very important is that obviously this zone is moving with the opponent. So as he moves along, you have to be able to visualize where this zone is and where it moves to be able to stay inside it, because then you maneuver such that you stay inside that control zone. And that brings us to the summary of today's lesson and practical tip, in the shape of a practical tip, how to address BFM on a high level. Well, first of all, as just stated, you want to get and stay inside the bandit's control zone. By managing range, angle and closure. Because by managing range, angle and closure, you're in a good position to stay offensive, to be able to attack if you have an opportunity. Okay? And to be able to do that, you should be able or learn to visualize the control zone behind your opponent, because that will allow you to find solutions to the BFM problems. If you can visualize mentally where the control zone is, you can maneuver such that you stay inside that control zone, whatever he does. And as stated before, if you keep a certain distance, minimum distance to the target, then you can manage whatever he throws at you. Okay, in terms of staying in control and staying inside that control zone, you will find it much easier to solve the BFM problems. Alright, that covers all the theory that I wanted to go over today with you. So now let's jump right into the practical examples. Alright, so welcome back to inside the cockpit. After the boring theory, let's have a look how these principles are applied in practice. Now in this first scenario, like in all scenarios, we are going to engage the bandit from an offensive position, so we are behind him, and we also have an energy advantage in terms of speed. And we want to apply our two main principles of being energy conservative and at the same time stay inside the control zone of our bandit by maneuvering such that we manage range, angle and closure, so we stay inside that control zone. And one way of doing this is the so-called high yo-yo maneuver. With the high yo-yo maneuver, we convert speed into altitude, so kinetic energy into potential energy. We can manage the angle a little bit, and this is a good way to manage range, angle and closure at the same time while we are conserving our energy. It looks roughly like this, as you can see here. As the bandit is turning into the right, or into us to the right, because he's slightly offset to the left, we'll fly toward him, and as soon as he's braking harder and harder, we're going to pull up toward his high 6 o'clock, and we're going to come back down once we see there's a good angle. So let's see how this plays out in practice. Bear in mind, our goal is to stay behind the bandit's 9-3 line. Right, so as you can see here, as soon as we see that bandit is pulling hard, we are pulling back up to his high 6 o'clock, as you can see. And now you can see that the initial angle from his brake turn has drastically been reduced because we did this yo-yo maneuver, and also we increased a little bit of range, which makes it easier for us to manage that. And now, as you can see, to close in on the bandit again, who is currently performing somewhat like this in terms of a flight path, we are performing a so-called low yo-yo maneuver. So we started out on top of him, top of his flight path. We are diving below his flight path to catch up, so we convert altitude into speed, and then we're going to come back up once we have a good low angle position for a kill shot. This is a so-called low yo-yo, and it has the adverse effect of a high yo-yo. So you can decrease range, you can increase closure rate, and you also increase angle depending on how the bandit reacts. But as you come back to align yourself with his flight path, we are in a good position for a kill shot. So let's do just that. Trigger down, engine damaged, that's it. Now, the next situation is similar. We have the bandit down here, but this time we have a much higher energy advantage because we are much higher than him, and we also have a larger aspect or angle initially. So you can see, you can see he's flying this time to the left. He's going to brake to the left because this time we are to the left of him and he wants to brake into us to increase angle, decrease range and increase closure rate. and we are coming at him at a much steeper angle, as you can see. So one way of solving that would be to keep pulling to his high 6 o'clock like this, fly a yo-yo and come back around. It's a perfectly valid option, but we're going to try something different. Maybe for whatever reason we don't want to do that and we want to get straight at him, maybe to get a snapshot. But in order to solve that situation with a different kind of maneuver, we can use the so-called displacement roll, and a slight variation to that would be the barrel roll attack. Essentially goes like this: as the bandit passes over us or under us, we perform a barrel roll into the opposite direction of the turn, so in this case to the right because he's turning left, and then we come back in behind him, and where we are going to be is his low 6 o'clock. And this displacement that you see here visualized is exactly what we want to achieve, to minimize or reduce the initial angle. Okay, so let's see how this plays out. As you can see, we're coming down, he's aware of us, and he's braking into us. Now, for whatever reason, we want to keep pushing, and in order to maintain visual, we roll around like this, and as you can see here, we are driving nicely to his low 6 o'clock position, where it is for once hard for him to see us or to maintain visual, and secondly, we are still in a good position. Even if he tried to reverse, so reverse his turn, we would still be in a good position and compensate for that. As you can see, good shots, pulling back up because we saw he's slow, high yo-yo, staying in control, and as he's trying to gain control, we roll over the top like this, and that's what's called a barrel roll attack. It's basically a displacement roll and a yo-yo combined. So again, this was a flat barrel roll attack, but still, and you can see the displacement and the effect. We go to his low 6 o'clock, and even if he tried to reverse on us, we can manage that very well because we have a good separation. So let's finish the job here. Some more hits. He's still flying, but obviously with the damaged aircraft now struggling. And now we are committed, we are settled in very nicely and firmly on his 6 o'clock, and there's nothing else he can do right now except pray, and there is the kill shot. Alright, so far we've looked at what happens when the bandit's maneuvering mostly in the horizontal plane, how we can use yo-yos, barrel roll attacks, displacement rolls to counter his maneuvers and to stay in control. Now we want to look at the following example, that the bandit is going to maneuver vertically, and in this case he's going to perform a split S toward us. And now we want to see how we can deal with that. But the same principles apply. So we can, if we visualize that control zone behind him, we should be able to find a good maneuvering flow. So instead of, as he's going down, braking into him and here risking an overshoot, what we are going to do is we're going to visualize that control zone. We're going to stay on the outside and see what happens, because we don't want to risk that overshoot. So let's see how this plays out. Lines real quick. So he's diving down. But we stay up. We keep our energy. Might be a bit hard to see for you, but we still have visual. Down here he is, quite low now. And as he's trying to get back up toward us, we can close in to good range. Angle currently is quite high, so we are just pulling back up into our yo-yo maneuver, come back down till we have a flat angle. He's trying to counter that, reverse slightly. Not a big deal. Barrel roll, keeping him inside, coming back down for now a rather low angle shot. Let's go. Hits, good hits, and destroyed. So in the next example is again vertical maneuvering. This time bandit is down here. This time he's gonna go up and into us, which is a more difficult BFM problem to solve, because he's gonna create more range and angle problems. As he's going up, he closes the range, and he's also increasing much more angle compared to when he goes back down. So let's see how we are going to solve that. But generally speaking, the same principle. As he's coming back up toward us in a sort of looping kind of maneuver, we're just going to stay on his high 6 o'clock where his control zone is, and we're just going to loop around him, not trying to cut any corners and risking the overshoot. No, we stay true to our principle, and let's see how this plays out. So he's pulling up into us, and we are visualizing that control zone. Of course, he's merging across our canopy, but we are still behind his 9-3 line, and we are coming back around. Okay, maintaining visual on him. He's down here somewhere, might be hard to see, but here. Okay, as he's coming around, we still have initially quite large angles because the flight paths are not quite aligned, but every time he's coming back up, losing energy and pulling that turn, we can use that opportunity with our energy advantage to align our flight paths, and that's basically what you see me do. So every time we go up and down, we're gonna get closer to his 6 o'clock at a better angle. So angle still high, but now he's climbing up, he's slow, we anticipated that. We drive toward that high 6 o'clock control zone. As we pull up, we also slow down, then we come back down nicely at a low angle for a good kill shot opportunity. So let's pull him into the crosshairs here. Squeeze the trigger, and we missed. Oh, nope, not a big deal. We pull back up, keep our energy. Even if we try to reverse now, we know what to do. Do our barrel roll attack. If not, we come back down from our yo-yo maneuver, line him up this time, aim better this time, squeeze the trigger, and kill shot. Alright, so what we want to do this time, after we've seen some examples and how we can build our maneuvering flow by applying these concepts, we want to now see how a fight plays out in, let's say, real time when both pilots fly to the limits of their capabilities. I want to use this opportunity to thank Erwin, who supported me with this video today by being the target. He's been a good sport about it and kind enough to come out and have fun here. So, as I said, in this fight we both fight to the maximum of our capabilities. We start again in the offensive position, and for this fight we also overlay Erwin's Erwin's field of view or point of view on the right hand corner of the screen, so you can see how it looks like from my perspective and his perspective. And yeah, the principles are the same. So let's get cracking. There's nothing new I can tell you now other than pointing out what principles we are applying, what maneuvers. So initially, again, we are coming in from the left, so he's going to turn into us to the left, and he's incorporating the vertical as well to get away from my nose and to give me no opportunity to shoot. And but we stay true to our principle. We stay inside of his control zone, behind him, try and align our flight paths with his, and yeah, so he's going into the vertical. We stay in that control zone because we have it visualized. We know his control zone is here, basically all this area where we are in, so we are good to go. He's right there, and that's where we want to stay. So we just keep maneuvering here. And now he's performed a good jinx there. Get away again. Vertical maneuver, no problem. We stay up. Wait for him to come back down. Have range, angle, and closure in check. merging with us at a higher aspect or angle this time, but it's not a big deal. We stay on the high 6 o'clock position. Avoid that flight path overshoot by pulling too aggressively. Always visualize the control zone. That's where we want to be. And you see that it's hard for him to maintain visual if we do that. It's not so easy, especially as he's maneuvering around as he does. Good gun strings there on his part, just avoiding us as we were preparing to shoot. But it's not a big deal again. We pull back up. We get back into that control zone. Wait for him to make a move. If he doesn't, we come and attack, which is what we do now. He's making his move. High yo-yo, staying above. He's reversing, trying to reverse. We're rolling around. Not a big deal. Again, we can fly our yo-yos to stay in control. He's going back down as he notices he's getting slow. Now we are settling in nicely on his 6 o'clock, and we are close enough for a good shot. So this is why we stay committed to the bandit, pull him into the crosshair, and kill shot. Alright, so let's go over some quick debriefing, shall we? So we learned, and it was demonstrated to us, that in order to win the engagement, we need to stay inside bandit's control zone, right? We learned how to do this by managing range, angle, and closure. Oops. And there's a very important principle that we should observe or bear in mind as we do so, and that is keep energy high doing so. And we can do that by converting potential energy, which you know is altitude, into speed or kinetic energy, and vice versa, because they're convertible. And if we do that properly, we are going to win the engagement, given that we managed to get into the bandit's control zone, and that's obviously what we are going to cover in future episodes. So for the next episode, as a sort of in-between episodes, and I'm going to do this for all of the content that we are going to cover in future, I'm going to do some sort of maneuvering debrief, if you will. So then in the next episode we are going to look at some examples on the blackboard, why certain maneuvers work, and what you can do about it. Only on the blackboard, so you have a visual aid of how what you can do, because the practical examples we see in the demonstration anyway. But then you have that for your study process available as well. And with that, there's nothing more for me to add today. I thank you for attending this lesson. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was useful for you. And there's nothing else for me to say other than Killer Fliege out.